For as much as everyone rags on Call of Duty every single year, the single-player campaigns have almost always been pretty solid. Not only has the gameplay itself always been tight, full of memorable set pieces that the series has slowly perfected over the past decade, but the actual narratives themselves have remained similarly enjoyable. Even in their silliest moments, and they can get pretty silly, the campaigns have always provided enough Hollywood thrills and pulpy twists to make them worth playing, and they deserve to be recognized alongside the series' more popular online modes. I'm Josh from WhatCulture.com, and this is every Call of Duty campaign ranked worst to best, the main series only. Number 14, Call of Duty 3. A pretty major step down from the brilliant second game. Treyarch's first attempt at the franchise was created in a mere 8 months, a ridiculous amount of time considering that each Call of Duty title today is given 3 years to be polished to perfection. Unfortunately, the title is more COD 2.5, and once again the single player jumps around the fronts of World War II, letting you view the conflict from the point of view of the British, Americans, Canadians, and the Polish. The latter two could have provided great campaigns had the title been given that little bit more time, but unfortunately there's not much to see here that hasn't been done better, both before and after COD 3. It's not one that you should be kicking yourself for missing out on, but given the circumstances, Call of Duty 3's campaign wasn't a bad effort from a developer working against a ridiculous deadline. Number 13. Ghosts. As far as most people are concerned, Ghosts is the lowest Call of Duty has ever sunk. That's almost true, but by introducing impressive zero-gravity and underwater sections, Ghosts attempted to shake up the core COD design as much as it could before the franchise was truly launched into full-on jetpack jumping sci-fi territory, immersing players into a dystopian future setting. The way the title draws upon pulpy genre elements of brainwashed super soldiers and top-secret branches of the military could seem a bit trite, and a bit familiar to fans of the franchise, but the narrative itself does just enough new to make these cliched elements at least a little enjoyable. Still, this was a campaign whose unique selling point was that it had a playable dog. A playable dog, that's all he could come up with. No wonder Activision switched to a 3-year dev cycle after this. Number 12, Call of Duty. Nobody gets it right in their first attempt, but with the original Call of Duty, developers at Infinity Ward came pretty damn close. Comprised of a team of ex-Medal of Honor personnel, the studio behind the first Call of Duty weren't afraid to repeat what worked in their previous World War II series, yet they were also able to lay the foundation of the large-scale battles the franchise would become known for. Unlike other entries in the genre then, the original Call of Duty embraced the multiplicity of World War II and the varied perspectives that came along with it, with the harrowing and intense Russian narrative being a particular standout. It doesn't hold up that well today, but its significance in gaming history shouldn't be understated. Number 11, Call of Duty Black Ops 3. While players agreed that the actual levels in Black Ops 3 were as solid, dark, and gritty as ever, its winding, convoluted plot was utterly divisive. Beginning with your character being brutally dismembered RoboCop style, you spend the rest of the game hunting down the people responsible for your mutilation. However, the final missions reveal that the game's introductory sequence was actually the only part that really happened, and the rest of the story actually took place in the mind of the player while their consciousness is being merged with someone else. It doesn't make much more sense when you see it play out for yourself, but it should be commended that a Call of Duty plot inspired debate about its ending, and aimed for something more ambitious than merely killing the bad guy in a lame QuickTime event at the end. Number 10, Call of Duty World War II. Although World War II was probably the most beautifully told story in the series, the actual heart of the narrative is content to repeat ideas and concepts we've seen done to death not only in other games, but games in this franchise. It's chock full of cliches. An all-American farm boy with a girl waiting back home, a team of strangers who become as close as brothers, and a hard-ass troop leader who don't take no shit boy, all pull down a story that's presented flawlessly. Still, the levels are enjoyable to blast through, and a couple of creative flares like a mission that has you go undercover in a Nazi headquarters are more than welcome. It's not bad, it just could have been so much more. Number 9, Call of Duty Black Ops 2. the first Call of Duty to really flirt with futuristic themes. Treyarch's Black Ops series almost lost its charm when it transitioned from its 1960s espionage roots to the near-future bombast of this sequel. But that messy, half-step plot, which jumps back and forward through time, is still a saving grace of this sequel, as the ability to see returning characters in a new context is admittedly appealing. The introduction of branching storylines adds something new to the COD formula as well. And although Black Ops 2 sometimes feels at odds with a publisher that clearly wanted to leave past conflicts behind, it's still a hugely enjoyable and surprisingly ambitious effort. Number 8. Advanced Warfare. Advanced Warfare, or Call of Duty, the one with Kevin Spacey, has been viewed as a rather weak entry into the franchise in recent years, but was considered a huge breath of fresh air for the series at the time. While some longtime fans decried the change, the introduction of exosuits is well done and necessary, giving players a wide variety of movement and combat options that brought more freedom to the game's single-player shooting. Plus, while the series doesn't have the best reputation for getting the most out of its Hollywood talent, everyone involved in the game absolutely kills it, giving an already pretty enjoyable sci-fi plot the gravitas it needed to be something truly memorable. Number 7. World at War. After the decent but forgettable Call of Duty 3, World at War was Treyarch's first real test as a main developer on the series, and boy did they deliver the goods. Given a full 2-year development cycle this time around, World at War put the focus on the Pacific theater of World War II, throwing players into a gritty, brutal portrayal of guerrilla warfare waged by and against the Japanese armies. In many ways, the campaign riffs on familiar sequences from Call of Duty 2. However, this time around they're presented in a much more cynical and violent way. Unlike the heroism of that second title, there's nothing really heroic about Treyarch's World War II tale, and that uniquely unflinching depiction of war makes this underrated game still worth picking up today. Number 6. Modern Warfare 3. Featuring some of the series' best moments, RIP SOAP my man, and some of its worst. The less we speak about the climax, the better. But while it couldn't quite hit the lofty narrative heights of its predecessors, the sequel more than made up for it with spectacular set pieces. Between sieges on heavily fortified castles and shooting your way through an airliner that's plummeting back down to Earth, there was no shortage of creativity in this troubled game. While it doesn't come close to reaching the quality of its predecessors then, it still acts as a satisfying and worthy conclusion to this genre-defining trilogy. Number 5. Call of Duty 2. Even when Call of Duty 2 hit shelves over 10 years ago, World War II had been done to death. But COD 2 was able to make it all feel fresh again. Jumping from the scorched North African battlefield with a band of British elites to the isolating depths of Stalingrad as a lone sniper, gave the other, more familiar scenarios a sense of personality, facilitating a wealth of interesting mini-stories for players to experience as they fought their way through this second game. While Call of Duty's split narratives made less sense as the games wore on, the ability to jump around different, distinctive conflicts in COD 2 is what made it so great, and still one of the defining World War II games to this day. Number 4. Modern Warfare 2. While Modern Warfare 2 was the point where Call of Duty campaigns got absolutely ridiculous, the Red Dawn-inspired Russian invasion of the USA was considered a huge jumping the shark moment at the time. It successfully followed up the blockbuster narrative of COD 4. In fact, by fleshing out SOAP, the silent and strangely named hero from the original game, and focusing on his relationship with Captain Price and the rest of the task force, resulted in you caring about these characters in ways you never did before. And even the ridiculous action sequences of this second title couldn't detract from the believability of that core relationship. Number 3. Infinite Warfare. Whoa, guys, I hear the boos. Give me a second to explain myself before you crucify me in the comments. After a few games of flirting with the sci-fi setting, Infinity Ward's most recent title finally embraced the genre by taking the series to space. And while that could have been the final jumping of the shark for Call of Duty, it all surprisingly works. The setting makes for creative firefights, while the ability to pilot your own ship gives you an undeniable adrenaline rush every time you jump into the cockpit. The writing isn't half bad either. While it starts off a bit slow and familiar, the story quickly ramps up in terms of scale and intensity in the second half, Admittedly, Kit Harington is completely wasted in his role, and the lack of a proper villain does drag down the story a bit, but it isn't enough to detract from the title's ridiculous high points. Number 2. Black Ops. Acting as a loose continuation of World at War, Black Ops focused on shady Cold War era CIA operations in a surprisingly interesting and shocking character-driven story. There's a great synergy between the gameplay and the missions and the actual overarching narrative that just clicks together beautifully. And although there's a killer twist that shakes everything up just before the game's climax, it's a testament to the quality of the title that the campaign would have been just as enjoyable without it. Yeah, it loses a bit of steam thanks to the constant numbers, Mason, what do they mean?
I don't know anything about any numbers.
But boasting some of the most memorable moments of the series, Black Ops was proof that Call of Duty could still be daring when it wanted to be. Number 1. Modern Warfare. Even 10 years on, Infinity Ward's exceptional campaign still holds up. And although Call of Duty 4 was the title that set into motion some of the series' worst single-player cliches and conventions, it's still unrivaled in terms of pure blockbuster spectacle and narrative pacing. Even moments that you've played to death retain the impact they once had. The nuclear explosion that abruptly ends one side of the campaign's story still shocks. Because the game's multiplayer cemented it as a classic, it's easy to overlook how similarly memorable the main campaign actually was. And the game's single player helped the franchise become the phenomenon it was and still is.
Hey guys, thanks for making it to the end of the video. Aren't you a star? Don't forget to like, share and subscribe below, and also there's probably more content floating up above my head, so why not check that out as well? Could be a laugh. Probably. 6 out of 10.